Good afternoon to you, Scott Baker.
Good afternoon, Mikey. Today, Monday, October 20th. And I almost got ahead of myself because sometimes we don't have tomorrow's field note yet, right?
Yeah.
And so we're here to talk about today's field note. But I actually have tomorrow's field note. Maybe at the end, I'll tell you what that's going to be about as a tease. But I almost gave the wrong number. So this would
Yeah.
be today, field note 1593. The title, When Should You Prop Up a Weak Team Member? Right?
Yeah.
So it's a good question because we're all going to face that. And probably actually one problem is that sometimes leaders end up spending a lot of time with the people that need the most help, when actually the enterprise could benefit by them spending more time with their very best performers. So this teeter-totter of where are you spending your time helping people get better is a very good question.
Yeah. Usually the question is posed from the idea of like, where do you put your leadership development budget, right? Is
Okay.
your cohort of rising stars the ones who need leadership development money allocated to them? Or is it like that second tier of 25% are probably the ones who might actually benefit more from leadership development, because you could make the case that those rising stars probably got it along the way somewhere already, and so they don't quote unquote need it, right? So if it's just this symbolic thing that you're giving to the group of people who've been identified as your rising stars, then maybe that's an ill use of the budget that way, right? So either way, the question has been involved in organizations for a long time, right? And so then this very question that says, well, what about the weakest of members? When should
Exactly
we be
right.
helping them? Yeah.
Well, let's go through the field note then and look, because there's sort of three criteria that it gives for when a leader should think about actually propping up that weak team member rather than cutting them loose or counting
Right.
them out and whatever you want to call that.
Now we're
And
using the words prop up. I'm having an issue with the words prop up, right? Because I don't see any positive connotations with the terminology prop up, right? Support is a very different word. But when you're propping somebody up, it feels like it's definitely someone who doesn't belong there, right?
the way you're seeing it is a weekend at Bernie's.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Where
That
we
is the
come
mental
in,
picture. Yes.
we have found the person that passed away in their cubicle, and we're
Yes.
just walking around, arms around, and being like, "It's going to be okay. We're going to
Yeah.
encourage you," right? And you're
Right.
like, "I don't know."
So anybody
Yeah.
who's actually trying in the organization sees that somebody else is being propped up. They obviously don't deserve it. I'm going to be
Yeah.
offended by it. And so
Well,
I wouldn't
and the field
call
note
any
gets to
other,
that point.
I
Like, what you-
understand, but the version of like, if we like when we should prop up, I feel like the answer is like never, never. Like my definition of propping up means never,
Okay.
never prop anybody up. But the idea of when should you support a weak team
Support.
member,
Yes, that's
yeah.
the other word used in the field note. So
Right.
all good questions. And so let's look at the criteria, and then we can debate whether we think it's on point. So of these three, the first one is important to understand that the underperformance stems from a skill gap or unclear expectations rather than a poor attitude, which is really interesting because the field note just comes right out and says, you're going to have a hard time changing anybody's attitude.
Yes.
And actually, that's one of the things in this field note that you kind of have to really chew on for a while, because you kind of think it's like, come on, I can win you over. I can get you excited if I just find the right key, magic sequence of keys to press. Certainly, that'll turn around. The field note is going, no, if you've got a poor performer now. Maybe it's not necessarily true for a high performer. Maybe if they're having a down day, you just need to get in there, turn them around, get them in the locker room. But maybe the wisdom here is poor performers with bad attitudes, you should just cut your losses. But if the poor performer has the right attitude, but obviously this is a skill gap of some sort, then maybe there is a chance.
So what counts as a skill and what doesn't when we're talking
And
about attitude?
and by the way, I left out. I said it once, but just to redefine it, it's a skill gap or unclear expectations, which could be on the leader.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So if a person has just a lot of self-limiting beliefs, maybe it's not really attitude as much as it's just like, there's a few glass ceilings here that I'm not aware of, but for some reason I keep hitting my heads on them. And so that's not necessarily an attitude, but those self-limiting beliefs are like preventing them from taking an accelerating step where they could take it.
Yeah.
I think sometimes that could be defined as an attitude, even though it's not an attitude. And then you could kind of think of that as like, well, they just need a better skill in their life of eliminating these self-limiting beliefs. Once they've got that skill down, then they're good to go, right? So it just makes me nervous about the idea of talking about attitudes as if they are skills that we could reverse, right? Because
well, right, yeah, I don't, because I'm not sure that is the case, and I do think that admired leadership has long said that leaders should not be adapting themselves to the particular personalities of their team members. That's why we're looking for universals that would, like, if you're trying to figure out 50 different ways to demonstrate that you're a fan of the people on your team, you're going to go crazy if you're trying to get inside of everybody's psychological profile. Now, it doesn't mean you're not aware of those things, but that you're looking for behavioral demonstrations that are more broad. Now, that said, yes, maybe this idea that if I improve my expectations and you get better at your skills, probably your attitude is going to improve. But maybe that function of skill gap is that when we onboard people, we kind of do it in the same way. And maybe people learn differently about how to learn a complex, process, or they haven't gone through the steps of the mentorship quite as effectively, or maybe the person that trained this person is not as effective as the person that trained these 4 people who are superstars. So there's a lot of different moving pieces, and you could come in and say, what is it that you didn't understand here? Because right now, somebody of your background and training and level, you should probably be hitting here, and you're still here. And if I understand that, then I can work with it. But if you're kind of, resistant at that point, then I gotta cut you loose.
Yeah.
Now,
what we're essentially talking about, though, like if we're going to just imply, like, who are these real attitude problems that we're talking about? It's people with inherent pessimism, right? So does that mean that I, as a leader, I'm okay to not prop you? If you're weak and your attitude is pessimistic and you're infecting everybody around, like, I would have the tendency to be like, oh, that's my responsibility to try to fix.
Yeah.
I'll try a little bit, but as the field note, like, they've kind of disqualified themselves from me actually helping too much. And
yes, right.
I can't fix everything.
And I don't know that we necessarily have to tie attitude to character, but you could say that leaders can't necessarily coach character, although we do think that you can focus on developing leadership character. We'll be talking a lot more about that over the next couple of years, actually, here at Admired Leadership. But in this kind of step of saying, all right, skill gap, important, then let's get to number 2. The next stage of when you would support a poor performing colleague would be, are they coachable? Do they seem open to feedback? Are they leaning in? Well, then lean in with them. But if they resist, let it go.
Right. And oh man, if you've ever coached anything in youth sports, like some of the most, like, kids can be aggravating, but if they're not coachable, there's no room for you to even want to spend time with an aggravating kid who is also not coachable. Right. It's just so hard to be able to do that. And so I'm glad this one is on the list, because it kind of justifies some of my frustration with people.
And we should note, you have 5 kids, I have 5 kids. There might be people out there who have multiple kids. The criteria of when you just say to the underperforming kid, listen, you're off the team.
Yeah.
It's a hard conversation. No, it's not quite that draconian inside an actual family, right?
No, but it would be like what we're talking about. The real analogy here is the idea that you've got a kid on the end of the bench who is just as aggravating as a non-coachable kid on the end of the bench.
Yeah.
But at least one will listen and try hard, right?
Right.
So when I have the moment to put one of those 2 kids in, I'm at least going to put the coachable one in. Right?
Yeah.
Even though they're both aggravating, they're both lack skill, right? The coachable one is like, I can really cheer for one who's listening and going to try to apply things. That,
and we know, kids are still being baked, right? So you are still developing both aptitudinal evolution as well as character evolution. The problem becomes those kids grow up, go to college or go to trade school or just apprentice on the job, and then they become part of the workforce. And now when they're 28 and they work for you, and it's different when you have people on your team, a lot of that has already come out of the oven, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, as a parent or someone dealing with kids, this is the process of how they form character and how they form, their whole approach and their attitudes.
Right.
So, but in the actual application of this, when you say, is there a desire to improve? Well, then great. Like even at Admired Leadership, when our coaches are coaching very high level executives for exorbitant fees, right? I mean, the at the highest level of corporate America, you'll have a client and you can just tell they're not into it. Like you're there, and you're like, okay. And what's the rule here? Do I sit there and try to cajole you into becoming better at that point? Well, generally not. I mean, we've coached thousands and thousands of leaders. And I think that even the wisdom for our coaches is it doesn't do you any good to work harder than the person that you're working with. Right? Where you're like, can I beg you to take this seriously? Well, no, that's not going to work. But when you're into saying, no, I want to get better. I'm already a great leader. I wouldn't be the CEO of this company of 40,000 people if I was incompetent, right? I know, though, that I have these gaps. And so I've got to get better here. And please help me.
Right.
That's actually where the magic of Admired Leadership comes into play. It's when your highest level performers are so eager to get better, our coaches can then help them get better, which is an amazing thing. Well, this works down all the way down. There's all ladders of this. So when you have somebody, we can all envision that you could have somebody who's underperforming and there was a skill gap and you help fix that. And they wanted feedback and they leaned in and you helped fix that. And now all of a sudden, maybe that person is on their way to being a superstar. I mean, they were the undrafted rookie, whatever it is. But let's get to this third thing and then we can kind of circle back and see what we left out. So the third criteria about whether to support, I'm not using the prop up phrase anymore, is that the role that they're playing is not so critical that the team can't endure their poor performance for a limited time. Right. So you've got somebody, they're underperforming, and it's a skill gap, or you were unclear on expectations. They've got the right attitude. They want some feedback. It's still not going to work if I'm going to say, we're going to go into a 6-month performance improvement plan, and we've got to live with this. And then everybody else is like, we can't live with this because this person runs the main infrastructure that makes us all successful, right? They run the switchboard of our entire organization metaphorically. So you've got to find a way that you're working with the person who's doing something valuable, that there's the potential for them to do something way more valuable, but it's not going to disrupt the whole team.
Right. So this last one makes me think that the reason that we're creating this is because we're providing a time for development to kind of sink in, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm comfortable with that as myself. It feels a little weird to have to bring in the rest of the team and be like, we are all going to be developing this person together. So your lack of comfort for the next 4 or 5 months as we prop them up is something that, like, I need you to accept that obligation of a leader too, even though I'm the only one who really should be. It just feels
I suppose. Can you look at it this way, which would be, we all need help at some point in some level. I just described how some of the leaders that we work with are some of the most accomplished people in the world, and yet they engage very high level leadership coaches because they want to get that 1/10 of a second faster in metaphorical terms. Right. And so they're hungry, right? They want to get better. So if you had somebody that was in a moment or a position of failure or a leader who's been brought on but is going to have to be exited, and this happens all the time, well, at some point you would want to work for an organization or with people who are like, we don't take the wounded out behind the barn and kill them, right? So if you're saying to your team, here's how, when people aren't quite on track, it's clear there's certain people that we want to get off the team right away. It was just a bad move, bad hire, whatever it was. But there's others, they show potential. There's one of these lagging indicators, and we're going to stand by them and we're asking you to stand by them. We don't want to limit the overall effectiveness. We're not going to put the third string person in with the first string team in the middle of the championship game.
Right.
We're not going to do that to you, but we're going to try to make this situation work. Then that sends a message to everybody that we as an organization, I as a leader, stand by people, and we're here committed to you getting better. I don't know that that's a terrible message, right?
No, if it's phrased that way. But there needs to be some thought put into that, because it does feel like the line between it's going to be disruptive because none of us like this, but we can put up with it for 4 months. 4 months. Oh my goodness. That's the way the trench talk is going to go. Now, in front of me as a leader, they're not going to say it that way. They're going to put on a good face. But where is the actual disruptiveness, right? If they're going to point out like a critical part of the actual order of operations that says we're putting them in a fail point that is going to be critical, so they can't be like, I'm agreeing with that, but they're not in that fail point. So all we're doing is like my frustration level for the rest of the team, I'm increasing by 40%, right?
Well, we're over time, but let me get the last part, which is best practices here means that your support for this person, highly structured, time-bound, explicit milestones. There are deadlines, right? This is an ongoing skill development thing, right? And so when that's the message to the person, the team sees it, and when that's all happening, then maybe you're getting this person right where they need to be. They're a valued member of the team. They appreciate the effort. Maybe everybody got better.
Right. It's amazing to me that we go all the way through this and we don't use the term employee improvement plan.
I did use it. You missed it.
I know you said it, but it wasn't. It's not actually in the thing.
Well, because normally we don't like that. That phrase sounds too procedural. Right? This is more like person to person. I mean, even if there's a plan, it's like, are you helping somebody get better? That's the whole point. Lead better.
Right. And so if that's the broad definition of it, all of us should be on employee improvement plans all the time. Right?
And we are.
Unless we're not. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Thanks, Mikey.
Cool. Thanks very much. Bye now.